Alright, so The Boys Season 5, Episode 5 has been released on Prime Video, and we are here today to do our review, recap, and breakdown for today's episode. So let's go ahead and get into this review with the title of today's episode. That would be One Shots. And by the way, I must say this was a much slower paced episode than the previous 4 that we got, and honestly I think it was a slight dip in quality. It kind of has me questioning the direction of the series a little bit, but we'll talk about all that stuff. We'll get into all that stuff. Now let's begin with the opening scene where we see Homelander's think team trying to put together a way to present him to the world as the Messiah, which that was a big theme of the last episode, and this episode picks up right where that one left off. Now we see them coming up with more propaganda for the Democratic Church of America, and then we also see Firecracker present Homelander with the Homelander Bible, and he loves this idea. Okay, he's getting off on this idea. It is appealing to his ego in every way possible, but he doesn't want to be the second coming. He wants to be the one and the only true God, of course, because his ego and his level of narcissism wouldn't allow anything less. But luckily they're able to convince him, like, listen, if we do it this way, the world will accept you as that. And so he chooses to go along with it, and that is where we begin our episode. Now, while this is taking place, Firecracker gets a phone call from her reverend, her former pastor, when she was a youth, when she was coming up in the church, and she chooses to go meet her pastor because this is a person who she's grown close to. And in this conversation with her pastor reminds her, hey, there's only one true God and to follow Jesus Christ. And so she is suddenly feeling all of this pressure with, going through with the plan to present Homelander as God when she already has a God that she believes in, and this whole plan is sort of betraying everything that she stands for on a spiritual level. Now that brings us into another scene with Firecracker where we see her speaking to O Father, and O Father is all the way in on Homelander being presented as God because of course he is in major debt with his church, and this is going to help with the revival of his church and of his wealth. So he is by no means going to go against Homelander in this instant, and we see him in this scene checking Firecracker, asking why she needs to see and talk to Homelander, saying, hey, listen, if you need a shoulder to cry on or you need someone to talk to, I could be a friend that you could talk to, even though we know that he is now on the insider circle with Homelander and he's in it for his own means. Now this is where we see Firecracker go on her popular news broadcast Truth Bomb to announce to the world that her former pastor is a starlighter. Okay, she makes up lies, she betrays her pastor even after the meeting that they had together, and she pretty much casts him out into the wind and makes it so that her pastor is sure enough going to end up dead, which we don't see take place in this episode, but just based off logic we can sort of follow that is more than likely where this is going to lead. Now we move over into a scene, and I thought this was hilarious. Okay, we pick back up with the Deep and Black Noir, and they happen to be having O Father on their podcast, and he is just trying to bridge the gap there between the red pill men and the more spiritual side of things, and trying to say, hey, listen, we meet people where they're at. So we got a great scene there, and then Black Noir out of nowhere begins talking on the podcast when we know he's not supposed to be doing this. He finally speaks up and he says to O Father, listen, bring him into the inner circle instead of the Deep because he has something that he could present Homelander with. And of course the Deep gets mad at this, but Black Noir did it to get back at the Deep for the Stan Edgar betrayal in the past 2 episodes. And that's pretty much where we leave off with these characters. Now we move over into a very dramatic scene where we see Black Noir on stage. Apparently he's an actor in his day-to-day life when he's not actually being Black Noir. So he's on stage doing, a performance, talking to a guy that we've seen constantly make appearances throughout this series. He pretty much is like the writer for a lot of the Vought movies. And so he is having a one-on-one connection with Black Noir as an actor and director relationship, and it is just overly dramatic. And then we see the director end up going to the toilet. While he's in the toilet, the Deep attacks him with, some type of aquatic life form. I'm not really sure what it was, but we get a disturbing scene of him being attacked while on the toilet. Okay, it comes up to the toilet bowl, attacks him. He's laying there dying, and then Black Noir comes over to him. We get another dramatic scene between these two, and now Black Noir is really pissed off because the Deep has pretty much ruined his acting career. Now we move over into a scene with Butcher's dog. He's seemingly having these very weird, strange, erotic dreams of Homelander. Not sure why this was included in this episode whatsoever, Okay, we really didn't need this. I did not need to see that at all. But nonetheless, it was present here, so we have to discuss it. We have to talk about it. And after that takes place, the dog ends up going to a trash can. Frenchie threw some chocolate away. The dog eats the chocolate. If you know anything about dogs, you know by no circumstances can they have any chocolate whatsoever. So then they do this whole thing where they get the hydrogen peroxide, they make the dog throw up, and then, you know, the dog's life is saved. Huey helped a lot with the process of saving the dog's life, and because of that, we almost get a scene where Billy Butcher and Huey are sort of patching things up. They're having a heart-to-heart with each other, and they seem to be starting to humanize each other a bit more. So I thought this was a nice scene between these two characters. Now moving on over into the character of Sister Sage. Okay, she happens to go into the elevator, she's talking to Soldier Boy, and then afterward she ends up speaking to Ashley about Homelander wanting to bring all of the soups back into Vought Tower to sort of just make sure that they are safeguarded and that they are protected while all of these Starlighters and protests and things like that are going on. Now Ashley is of course against this at first, as she's been this entire time, and like her little face on the back of her head is talking to her, is speaking to her, right? And then Sister Sage says, hey, have a drink with me. You know, she gets Ashley drunk so she can start getting more of the truth out of her. And then Sister Sage admits her own truth and her own endgame while being, you know, a part of Vought and a part of Homelander's plan for mass destruction. Now, Sister Sage's plan is essentially to just watch the world end. That's pretty much what she wants. She says she wants to watch it all take place, as she's one of the last people alive inside a bunker that she has planned. You know, she's the smartest person in the universe, at least in the boys' universe. And so her plan is just world destruction through Homelander. And she seemingly does not care about anything that happens to be going on, which I find is very strange for the smartest character in the universe. But at the same time, this is just the nature of her character. So she wants the soup virus released and it to wipe out everybody. And I guess we'll see if her plan ends up coming to fruition. Now we move over into Homelander and Soldier Boy. They go off to talk to Stan Edgar. There's a whole power play between Stan Edgar and Homelander. You know, he's addressing the fact that Homelander has daddy issues, which is the only reason that Stan Edgar is even still alive. Homelander seemingly keeps alive anyone who disrespects him, but kills anyone who just bows down to him completely. It's a very weird complex with this character, but Stan Edgar ends up giving them information that if they want to find V1, they have to go talk to a soup named Marathon who lives in Hollywood, and that is when we see Homelander and Soldier Boy make their way off to Hollywood. Now, during their visit in Hollywood, they see Seth Rogen, they see McLovin, and they see a bunch of other like famous Hollywood people, because of course they're in Hollywood. All these people are just hanging out at Marathon's compound. He lives in this rich mansion. You know, he's had this successful movie star career after he was kicked out of Vought. He goes to his secret room where we see he has piles and piles of baby oil. Okay, so Marathon's on that Diddy stuff. All right, and Homelander's disgusted by this. He looks him up and down with this look of disgust. I thought it was hilarious. And while they're there, all these people are talking behind Homelander's back about how much they dislike him, how much they disagree with him, and Homelander is annoyed by that. While at the same time, Seth Rogen and another member comes up to Homelander, praising him, bowing down to him, and he is disgusted by them. He says, like, get away from me before I just kill you. Okay, we know that to be true with Homelander's character. All right, so while we're seeing all this baby oil and Nazi memorabilia inside of Marathon's secret hideout room, or whatever you'd like to call it, he ends up saying that Bombsight is likely the person that has the V1. Now, we mentioned Bombsight in the last review because they did drop his name during that episode, and so I guess that's where we're going to have to lead to find the V1. Now, that doesn't happen in this episode. Instead, they go a completely different, more insane route. All right, we see Soldier Boy doing coke. He's doing all these different drugs. These people are talking behind Homelander's back. Homelander is trying his hardest to ignore it. We see Seth Rogen and all the other guys playing poker around the table, and then Homelander seemingly gets mad at them because I guess they've created all of these terrible memes about him, and then he eventually walks up to Marathon to confront him because he can hear Marathon loud and clear talking all of this disrespectful stuff about him. Now, while he is confronting Marathon, Soldier Boy says, hey, listen, relax, what, you can't take a joke. And then we see another soup walk up to Homelander, tap him on the shoulder, and when he turns around, he breathes on him with like his superpower or whatever, and then he ends up knocking Homelander out. And Soldier Boy is like, what the hell is going on? What is happening? They're all trying to explain to Soldier Boy, like, listen, let's just take him out. All right, none of us like him, including you. Even you, Soldier Boy, do not like Homelander. He's a terrible human being, and he's been doing terrible stuff around the United States. Let's just take this guy out here and now while we have the chance. And this is really the best opportunity that anyone's going to have to kill Homelander. Now, what I really loved about this scene is what comes next. All right, we see Soldier Boy actually take up a level of defense for Homelander. I thought that was amazing character development. All right, between these two, he says, listen, he is all the things you said he is. All right, he is this despicable person, but he's my despicable person, okay? Because it is his son at the end of the day. And I thought it was nice to see Soldier Boy stick up for Homelander in this moment. And then we get an insane scene where Soldier Boy begins just taking out every single person involved with trying to kill Homelander in this very moment. Soldier Boy is killing every single person that he can get his hands on while Homelander's just knocked out on the ground. And then we get a scene between Soldier Boy and Marathon. Now Marathon's power, okay, he was replaced by A-Train. So his power was that he runs fast. Obviously, it's in his name. So he's sprinting after Soldier Boy, trying his best to do what we seen A-Train do in season 1, episode 1, where he ran through Huey's girlfriend. Essentially, Marathon's trying to do that. He's trying his best to sprint into Soldier Boy so we can get that, you know, combustion and just watch people explode. That's what he's trying to do. And this is one of the most hilarious scenes in this entire season. It's one of the best scenes in the entire episode, where Soldier Boy is trying to hide out throughout Marathon's house. Marathon is constantly chasing him, doing the sprint forward, trying to kill him. And every single time while he's doing this, Soldier Boy is throwing another member of Marathon's crew. So all of these people at the table that were playing poker, you know, Seth Rogen and all those people, he's just throwing them in front of Marathon, and we just see them die each and every time. Okay, Marathon's running through person after person after person. It was one of the most insane scenes in the entire episode and in the entire season. And then we finally get to Seth Rogen. He goes, listen, do exactly as I say if you would like to survive this scenario. They go, okay. And as soon as Marathon's about to sprint towards Soldier Boy, he tells them, listen, jump out now. And they jump out, and that is the last of Marathon's crew that ends up exploding, ends up combusting. And it was just ridiculous. Okay, ridiculous, over the top, hilarious, exactly what we expect out of this series. And quite honestly, up to this point, this episode was very boring, so I'm glad that we're ending on a high note here with this insane scene of Marathon killing all of his own friends on accident. Now Soldier Boy ends up running to the baby oil room. Okay, he pours a bunch of it out on the floor. Marathon sprints in there trying to kill him since he's finally the last person in the house, and he ends up slipping on the baby oil. Again, very on the nose here, very ridiculous, but he does. He slips on the baby oil, he falls, and Soldier Boy is a beast because he snaps his leg, breaks his leg, is about to break the other one. He's demanding that he tells him where the V1 is. And just before Soldier Boy ends up killing this guy, Homelander has woken up and he puts his skull through Marathon's head. It explodes. A crazy finish for the Marathon character. And then we get a pretty nice scene between Homelander and Soldier Boy where they're having their own heart-to-heart, and he's like, why did you save me? And he's like, listen, we gotta stick together at the end of the day. And I thought that was sweet, because if these two characters stick together, right, they are an unstoppable force. All right, now it's time for us to discuss the final scene in this episode. We see Homelander go off to visit Firecracker. All right, he confronts her about the pillow talking she's been doing with Soldier Boy and sleeping with Soldier Boy, his father, and he is just disgusted. All right, he's disgusted that she slept with them. He's like, I thought you were supposed to worship me. I thought I was your God. You're supposed to worship me. You're supposed to bow down to me. You're supposed to only love me. You're supposed to only want me. And she's trying to say, listen, I do. It's because you neglected me, etc., etc. She's trying to have every excuse in the book as to why she did what she did. But let's be honest, there is no excuse for it. And then in a very surprising moment, Homelander tells her, listen, pack your bags, get out. You're fired. And he is on his way out the building. All right, he's just going to leave, and he tells Firecracker to leave. And that is when she makes a very grave mistake. She begins begging, groveling at Homelander's feet for his forgiveness, trying to convince him that no, she does see him as a god, etc., etc. And Homelander's disgusted because at this point he knows that she is lying to his face and that she betrayed him. And honestly, it is her own fault. He tried to give her a second chance. He said, listen, just pack your things and leave, and he would have been done with her, and that would have been it. She would have been still alive. All right, and the reason I say still alive is because the next scene that we see take place while she is groveling at Homelander's feet, he just grabs her head and jams it into a statue, killing Firecracker off after she's betrayed her religion, after she's betrayed her identity, her spirituality, everything that she stood for in honor of Homelander. He straight up murders her, which is exactly as this character deserves, let's be honest. And then it cuts to black, and that was episode 5 right there. So like I said, guys, this episode was the weakest so far, all right, because the first 4 episodes I thought were fantastic. I loved all of them. I rated them all 10s out of 10s. I loved every single minute of them. But in this one, I was starting to get very worried. That first half of this episode was pretty boring. It was pretty inconsequential. We didn't need a lot of what we got to see here. And it honestly feels like, are we even about to get a finale here? It feels like we're about to get another season, because they are just lollygagging with the plot here. And we're going to have a lot to wrap up in these final 3 episodes. But luckily, we ended on a high note, with Marathon murdering everyone and then Homelander killing Firecracker. Those were fantastic scenes. That was extremely entertaining, and I'm glad that they included that here. And with that being said, let's go ahead and rate this episode. If I had to rate season 5, episode 5 of The Boys, I would give this episode a 9 out of 10. It gets the 9 out of 10. I do think it was a strong episode, but definitely a step down. Okay, I think this is the first time that they didn't have a perfect episode, and I didn't like a couple of the things we got here, but they did end on a high note, and it made me happy seeing that finale. So I can't wait to see what happens next. I'm loving this series so far. I'm loving this season. I'm hoping that they nail the finale, because if they don't, we could potentially be getting a terrible ending for one of the best shows of all time, which we've gotten too much of in the past, and need them to nail this finale. Okay, but those are my thoughts on this episode, guys. I'm curious to know your thoughts on this episode down in the comment section down below. If you don't know what we do here on Demigod ENT, we do film, TV, and pop culture based content. So if you're interested in this type of content, you're in the right place. Hit subscribe, hit the like button if you enjoyed this video. I'll catch you in the next one, guys. Peace.